Hi there guys. In this video we're going to have a look at some Remington ammunition in 303 British. This is the Remington UMC load with the 174 grain full metal jacket bullet. See that L303B1 is the product number. And this is Remington's offering under their UMC brand. UMC stands for the Union Metallic Cartridge Company, which was absorbed by Remington quite a long time ago. UMC is a very old brand name, goes back to the I think the 1860s or 70s, something like that. Anyway, this is Remington's offering kind of for their military surplus equivalent ammunition and for their bulk offerings as well. UMC is kind of that end of the market that they're trying to address. So there's a look at the box. I lucked out. There was only one box of this ammunition at my local gun shop, and I picked it up, so I had the opportunity to do a test on it. So there's what the box looks like. And they have a picture of a bullet in here, a metal case bullet, but it's actually not the one that's in this ammunition, so don't take that to heart. And they also note that they're using their clean bore priming. Of course, they've been using that for a long time. That's an old brand name. Here's one of the cartridges out of the box, and as you can see, it is a full metal jacket bullet with a can lure. Let's see if we can get really close up here. We might be able to see the cartridge case is actually crimped into the can lure, and the cartridge case is of a commercial style. It's got the undercut above the rib here, or above the rim I should say. And there's the head stamp, RP, Remington Peters, 303 British. Anyway, I'm going to pull apart 10 rounds of this, and we're going to weigh the powder charges, we're going to weigh the cartridge cases, we're going to weigh the bullets, and then after that we're going to go to the range. We're going to shoot some of this for accuracy tests and velocity tests as well. I'll take my chronograph along, and I'll use my target setup number 4 Lee Enfield with Parker Hale sights, so as to get the most accuracy that I can out of this ammunition. So anyway, I'm going to pull some of this stuff apart with my trusty old Midway impact bullet puller here, and we'll get back to you when that job is all done. I've got 10 rounds of this stuff pulled apart now, so let's have a look at the projectiles. Now, according to the Remington Arms website, this bullet has a ballistic coefficient of 0.315, so that's a handy thing to know if you happen to have any of those ballistic calculator programs for your smartphone or anything like that. It's nice to have that number to plug in. I'm a little perplexed by why Remington labels this ammunition the way they do. They call it 174 grain metal case, and it is metal case, but that's kind of leaving some of the information out. It is, in fact, a full metal jacket boat tail bullet, and you'd think that they would want to mention the fact that it's a boat tail. But anyway, this would be basically kind of a duplicate or a replacement for the Mark 8 style bullet for 303, being a boat tail design. And let's have a look at the diameter of this particular projectile. We measure it out here. You can see we have 3, 10, and a half. So it's actually kind of on the small side for a 303 bullet. Normally you would see these things running at about 311, so slightly undersized in my opinion. They could be a little bit bigger, it wouldn't hurt. This is a fairly long bullet because it's a boat tail. Of course, it ends up being fairly long. We end up with a bullet that's 1.26 thereabouts, 6.2. So boat tail bullets are always going to be a little longer for their weight than a flat base would be. And also, boat tail bullets tend to have a little less bearing surface than a similarly weighed flat base bullet. And as a result, they often don't shoot as well in guns that have heavily worn barrels. If you got a barrel that's kind of shot out to some degree, usually boat tail ammunition will shoot less accurately out of a worn out barrel than a flat base bullet. And if you want the best accuracy out of a worn out barrel, you shoot round nose because they are shorter yet and have even more bearing surface. But if you've got a good barrel, a bow-tail bullet is not really a big issue, other than the fact that there is a little bit more wear at the muzzle from blow-by when the bullet emerges. Anyway, this is a lead core bullet with a gilding metal jacket and a fairly good candelure pressed into it there. I took some weights of all these bullets, and we ended up with the lightest bullet of the 10 was 173.7 grains. The heaviest was 174.3 grains, and we got an average of 174.1 and a standard deviation of 0.2. And between those heaviest and lightest bullets, we got an extreme spread of 0.6 of a grain. So that's pretty decent for what is basically not a match grade bullet. It's a military ball equivalent type of bullet. So I would say that's pretty darn good quality for the market that it's intended to be aimed at. All right, I'm back with some more illumination here. Let's see if we can show you just how far up in the case the powder comes, because that's always kind of interesting to see what kind of load density we've got with any given factory load. You can see that the powder comes up to a point probably 1/8 of an inch below the junction of the case body and the case neck. So that's a fairly high loading density, especially since that is a long bullet and it would sit down fairly far in the case and take up some of that airspace, because you see if the bullet is seated to the candelure, the base of the bullet comes down to just about where the top of the powder would be. So that's a fairly high loading density, which is a good thing to see. So we'll pour the powder out into the scale here, or the scale pan, so we can see what it looks like. Make sure we get it all out. And we've got it's basically a flattened spherical type of powder, so a ball powder, a flattened ball powder. And ball powders have their advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are that they measure very, very evenly, and they have an almost unlimited storage life if they're stored under any kind of reasonable conditions. So that is a good thing. The downside to some ball powders is that they are a little harder to ignite, especially in colder weather because of their shape. But not sure exactly what burning rate this powder would be, but I suspect it's, well, I'm not even going to speculate on that, because somebody might decide that was a reason to use my speculation as perhaps load data. So you can look at some loading data for ball powders for 303 British, and you can come to your own conclusions as to what kind of powder you think it is. Anyway, we weighed the 10 powder charges from the 10 rounds I pulled apart. And we had the highest weight was 44.4 grains. The lightest weight charge was 43.8. We got an average of 44.15. I know that's one of those things you could round up or round down, because the scale doesn't measure to that degree of accuracy, but you can call it either 44.1 or 44.2, depending on which way you want to round. Standard deviation of 0.2 of a grain, and an extreme spread between the high and the low of 0.6 grains. So that's certainly very good accuracy, which is not surprising for ball powder because it does measure so well. Anyway, the last component of the ammunition that we'll have a look at here is the cartridge case a little further. And you can see inside the case there, get some light in there, you can see that it is in fact a Boxer Prime case with a central flash hole. This is a fairly lightweight case, and you can see inside there that there's a lot of volume. The way the case is shaped at the base is fairly large, and not exactly my idea of the best way to make a case for a 303 British, just because there's usually a lot of extra room in 303 British chambers, and having a case which is more solidly made at the bottom is generally a good thing in my opinion. But anyway, we'll weigh a case here, and I think I've done that in the past, but I don't have my data floating around at the moment, so we'll weigh a case and we'll see just what a empty case weighs. I'm only going to weigh one cartridge case. I'm not going to get into the business of weighing 10 of those like I did with the bullets and the powder charges. But this one particular case that I'm weighing here weighs in at 160.5 grains. So by comparison with some of the other brass that I've weighed recently for 303 British, that is certainly on the lighter side compared to the military type brass that I've seen in the other brands, like the Privy Partisan and some of the that old Herder's brass, excuse me, which I recently reviewed. Anyway, that's with the primer removed from it, and that is an unfired case, so there's no soot, there's no anything else on that to kind of corrupt that reading. And since we've got the primer out, we'll have a look at the primer pocket there. You can see that the case is radius nicely, so that eases the insertion of primers. And while we're at the topic of primers, here's the primer that I removed from that case. If we can get the camera to focus, there we go. And this is, according to Remington's website, this is a Remington 9.5 primer. So nothing too exotic about that, a standard large rifle primer. Anyway, I think that will do it for the benchtop portion, at least until we go out and shoot some rounds. So we'll move from this on to a range test, and after the range component of the test is over, perhaps we'll come back for some conclusions.